Welcome, folks. Today, I really have one of the pioneers, one of the strongest leader in microfinance in Africa, who not only built a very sustainable, profitable institution, but one of the largest, and he scaled it up, really. That was a big challenge in the microfinance market. Godwin really took it and not only did he scale up his institution to be the largest in Africa, but he also was instrumental in creating capacities for others. The Central Bank of Nigeria saw Godwin as the role model for microfinance in that country. And now it's a pleasure to have him here. And I look forward to talking to him. So welcome, Godwin.
Thank you so much, Asa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So, Godwin, I'm, curious, and I think my audience would be curious as to how did you get started? What motivated you to start microfinance and approaching Dr. Yunus from Grameen in the early stages? So maybe if you can narrate that story as to, first of all, what motivates you to work with poor people, and that story about how you reached out to Dr. Yunus to create LAPO.
Yeah, thank you so much. By the time I stepped out of the university in 1981, a few years later, I took up a job with the cooperative department of my regional government in Nigeria. That decision was premised on the fact that my understanding, even before then, of what cooperative is. For instance, a common definition of a cooperative society is an economic association of persons with limited means, underlying limited means, who put their resources together, and from that pool, the cooperative members can therefore draw from that to meet their respective needs. For me, that was quite intriguing. That for me was quite an interesting way to empower the people at the bottom of the society. So I readily, in 1985, joined the cooperative department. I went through training, I was working, I was deployed to the field. And in 1986, we do also realize that that was the time the then military government in Nigeria adopted the central components of the Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, which consisted the devaluation of the national currency, rationalization of staff in the public sector, and the cumulative effect of this led to a spike in the rate of poverty in Nigeria. It is therefore a few years later, while I was working as a cooperative officer, that I came up with the idea that perhaps it will be more effective to address the issue of poverty with three key programs: health programs and social empowerment program, if done in a non-governmental basis. So that was how I started with 3 women in my local church. And few months later, I read about what Dr. Yunus, as he was then called, was doing in Bangladesh. It was a feature in a Nigerian newspaper. So I was so much interested because it was like what I was trying to do. And I sent a letter to him. That was quite interesting because the feature in the Business Times Nigeria did not carry the street address of the bank. So I simply addressed Dr. Yunus, Grameen Bank, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Some weeks and months later, he responded. When I opened that, the first thing I can't forget was his very impressive signature. And in addition to that, he includes huge newspaper cuttings of what Grameen Bank was doing. So I responded to him to say, thank you for all this wonderful document you sent to me. I wish I had some support. Professor Sinus therefore published that letter in the Grameen dialogue.
Yeah.
And a program officer of the Ford Foundation in Lagos, Nigeria, subscribed to that dialogue. And he read it and wrote to me. I said, hey, come to Lagos and let's discuss. Anytime you're in Lagos, let's discuss what you are doing with Lift Above Poverty Organization. As I tell you, I did not wait for any time to be in Lagos. I went to Lagos straight. So that was the beginning of our relationship. But by early 1991, Professor Yunus invited me to the international dialogue that was April, May in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and I attended. Obviously, you can't relate with Professor Yunus for 2 weeks without being, sucked into the whole idea of that. So on the eve of my departure, and I face down on my bed in Midtown Hotel. Midtown Hotel was, and I said I was not going to go back. Going back from what I have started with LAPO. So the truth was that in 1992, the next year, April, I put in my resignation, and that was the beginning.
Yeah, that's quite a story. From Benin City to Lagos to Bangladesh to Lagos to
come back. Yeah, that's exactly. That was quite an
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, right. And it's sort of, without knowing the address, right? You took a shot.
Yeah. For me, that I remember when I had to tell this story again and again. There was a microcredit summit there, and I was going to take the story as that was very, very interesting. But that actually pointed to one thing. I always emphasize when I tell this story. It speaks to the popularity of Grameen Bank, even at that time.
Yeah.
In English. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Yunus was really, a great communicator. Really, he knew how to get the message across. He had, when I, like the Mecca, of I also went to see Dr. Yunus, and I was just the vice president at that time at Deutsche Bank. And,
Yes.
He treated me like I was a dignitary. There was a whole department, took
Yes.
pictures. There's a whole floor on that, his big building, which was communication. I think
that was when they already had that building.
Yeah.
Before when I visited, they had a smaller place.
Yeah.
And if I don't know if you have my memoir, if you don't have, get you a copy and really read about my trip. Professor was wonderful.
How can one find your book? Is it on Amazon or?
I think so. We look to the publisher. If not, I can get you a copy. Some of my friends, Alex Count, Grameen Foundation, got a copy. In fact, because there's so much talk about he tried to get his former colleagues. It's a very interesting 301 pages, and it speaks directly to my life and my LAPO journey. Actually, the title is Touching Lives, My LAPO Journey.
Touching Life, My LAPO Journey. Okay, great. So I think maybe we can talk a little bit. I'm also curious as to your nature, right? I mean, clearly you were working for cooperative, and from the beginning you must have some, sort of soft spot for working with poor people. What got you on that direction? Was it your childhood? Were you, how did that spirit come into you?
Ordinarily, people think that my commitment to poverty alleviation could have been as a result of my experience with poverty. That is far from truth. Beyond the general deprivation in rural setting, our household was, a much better off. This is an indicator that I was born in August 1958, and my father completed a story building in May of 1958. So, and for areas around Benin and that community, that was a rare feat for a man. He was a farmer, a big one, rice farmer, and so he did that. So I think what was responsible for my my heart for the ordinary people was the fact that very early in life, I got aware of the situation in Nigeria. In my year 9 in the school, that was we saw the primary. In my year 5, I was in primary 5. My teacher then required us to put some pens together, and we buy a newspaper on Wednesday, and we read, and all that. So before I left my primary school, by seconds, I was already addicted to the newspaper. So I know about the condition of Nigeria. I read about Nigerians who were agitating for better life for the people. So I got very interested. In that book, I, side by side with Professor Yunus, there was a Nigerian who I said inspired me. He was a committed person to education for the low-income people. He was an advocate for good governance. He was so he inspired me.
Your
And so
teacher, is this your primary school teacher? Is that
it was not, my primary school teacher introduced me to reading newspaper.
Right.
But in the process of reading newspapers, I became aware of the condition of living in Nigeria. And of course, I had some Nigerians who were activists, who were advocating for better life for ordinary people, who were advocating for good governance, who were advocating for frugality in governance and all that. So I got so much interested in one of them in my book. I put his picture in my book, that he actually inspired me along with Professor Yunus. So that was the beginning how I got involved in issues that concern the ordinary people. By the time I was stepping out of the university, I was sufficiently aware on what meaningful development should be. That it should be a development that had impact on the large number of people at the base of the society. So joining the cooperative for me was therefore a sort of how can that be done? But on the line, I got disillusioned about the cooperative practice. First, I will explain this. First, the cooperatives in Nigeria, I think in Africa, they were over-officialized. What I mean by this is that the government officials were responsible for almost everything. The formation, the inspection, the audit, so it was like most people who were cooperators felt that it was a government entity rather than their own. And the rules, the laws, the cooperative laws and regulation were never reviewed. Even today, the cooperative laws in many regions in Nigeria are not significantly different from the cooperative ordinance of 1935 by the colonial government. So you could look the mindset of the colonial government was like, these are the natives, so the rules should be in such a way that everything is centralized in the hand of the colonial cooperative officer. So we just got independence and we adopted that. And therefore you have Nigerians who are now very powerful government officials that have so much influence cooperative, to the extent that most cooperative officers, most corporators never consider their cooperative as their own property, another. So there were some of the issues that I felt disillusioned, and I consider doing lending in a non-governmental way.
Right. So more in a private sector approach, right? Rather than
because I've not heard about microcredit. There was no microcredit. I just did that. It was when the Ford Foundation wrote to me that he read about LAPO in Grameen Dialogue, and saying that anytime I will be in Lagos, that I should come to the office. I didn't wait for any time to be in Lagos. I came straight from Benin City to Lagos. So, but eventually, we had conversation. He sent somebody from outside the country to visit me and to do an assessment. And he did that. The program officer came himself, visited, and then it was positive. So July 1991, we got the first installment of 16,000 US dollars to support LAPO from the Ford Foundation.
Which year was this?
I can't forget I received that amount. July 31st, 1991.
1991. Okay. Wow.
Yes. Sure,
yeah,
sure.
$16,000.
No, 16 years. Yeah. Actually, the whole grant amount was 20, but the first tranche was 16,000, 16.
Right, right. So tell us a little bit, a lot of people feel that are starting to do something in the social sphere, that they are just so challenged, and there's so many, that I want them to know that all of us, have faced the challenges. Talk about your early years, how that $16,000 that got you started into bringing the largest and, well-established institutions like LAPO.
Yeah, I said it couldn't even be seen as 60,000 getting us started. It was started some years earlier with 300 naira. 300 naira probably was should be at that time. Could be about 30, 20, 60 dollars or one time. 200 or something like that. It was a bit. But you see, I gave this. It's in that book. I gave the 300 naira, 100 naira each to 3 women in my church. A lady was very elderly, another one, a wife of a driver, and the other one, a very young lady. So every 4th day, which is our week, the traditional week. The traditional week is not the seven, So you have the 4 days. Every 4 days, there's a market, a major market. So at the evening of the 4th day, I will go and collect 10 naira each, in the evening. In the book, you're going to also see a situation where one lady, Mrs. Rose Oliwe, I got to her house, I knocked, and she came out. She told me, and I said, 10 naira my She said, no, I didn't. I said, well, you borrowed. She said, no, I didn't borrow. So I was so surprised because 4 days ago I was there. So why should it be now? So in that confusion, I walked away to the next person. As I was walking away, she ran after me and caught up with me. And sir, my husband was in the living room. I did not want him to know that. And so that was before even I got in touch with Professor Yunus. So by the time I went to Bangladesh, this group and everything, I came back, and then so I added some money, I think 5,000 from the cooperative, borrowed from a cooperative. When what the Ford Foundation amount did was this. It set us off on the path of institutionalization. It started the beginning of LAPO going beyond myself. I employed 2 persons, okay, to
Yeah.
join me and doing that. So, and that was what enabled me to resign from my government job the following year, May 1992. So that was, and in addition, when we visited Bangladesh, Professor Yunus required all the participants to develop a proposal for replication of Grameen Bank in their respective country. I did. That was $25,000. I did. And eventually, it was so by the following year, 1992, I was able to receive additional funds from
Grameen Trust.
Grameen Trust.
Professor Latifi, right?
Latifi. Yeah, Latifi was there. So the lady who is now the executive director of the Yunus Center, Lami, was actually a program officer that she processed this then. But that was the interesting thing. So when that happened, that provided me opportunity, you know, to institutionalize a little bit. And in 1993, that's a year after I resigned, I moved from my living room to rent a place. For 1 year, even after my resignation, I was doing it from my living room. Even before my resignation, while I was still working, I was doing it from my living room. So 1 year after my resignation, I moved to an office in Benin City.
And
so that was how Professor, yes.
It's very limited resources, but you kept on track and then you built up from there in terms of growing it.
Yeah, I think I try to emphasize this too. When you find anyone will find himself in the position I was at that point, the only thing that can sustain you is actually your passion. You know, I was too passionate. I was too sold to LAPO. At times, my wife will joke that one day I may be walking along and somebody will say, "Good morning, Mr. Ehigiamusoe," and I will respond, "LAPO," instead of so for me,
it was in your blood.
yes, I was saturated. So it was a huge fate. My uncle, for instance, was so worried because I lost my father early. So my uncle was so worried that I could resign from government work and I would be at home working, because the concept of working then, I mean, I'm talking of 1992, was that you leave home.
Right.
For him, I was not working.
Work from home wasn't there, Godwin.
now people can work from home now, no issue.
Right.
But when you talk of 1992, you work.
Yeah.
So but I think for me was the passion. It was too.
Right.
It was too strong.
The reason I'm talking about it is that people who are listening to this and say, well, they don't have the resources or they don't have this, can sort of learn from what your story is in terms of limited resources with the passion to continue the work. But maybe, Godwin, you can talk a little bit about, besides funding, right? That's always a challenge. And I'll talk to you about funding a little bit as well, because, but what other challenges were you facing as you were starting LAPO, and how did you deal with them?
Well, let me put it this way, was that there were challenges at various stages, but the point we are discussing here is what at the beginning, what were they? And the first one was actually to be able to convince the potential borrowers to believe that LAPO was free. Because what people are used to in my environment were either money lenders or there's something, a formal group. And then when they borrow from money lender, they do a lot of either collateral, the agreement is written and is skewed to against them and all that. Here they were saying, You are giving people's loan, no collateral, no tough agreement. And so for many of them, it was too good to be true. So you may think that it was not a problem. For me, it was, because when you go to talk to somebody, you convince, and when the concept of group came in, that at times made it a little difficult. There's this understanding in Africa that we have social with group people, but when it comes to money, people tend to be a bit very careful when they want to enter into a group. I remember then I used some women. Okay, you are afraid to join a financial group, as they would call it. Okay, I would say, if you have a serious problem and you don't want to tell your husband, you don't tell your parents, who will you tell? And once they mention a particular name, I would say, yes, that you can form a group with her. Because you have trust, confidence.
Yeah.
So that for me was that. But the next challenge was that immediately we were able to convince, and I had additional 2 staff. The demand was now getting more than the resources we had. So that was another challenge. But the good news was this. Professor Yunus has provided this amount. I mean, the Grammy Trust, it was structured in such a way that it was unbelievable. The exchange rate was fixed. So there was no issue of exchange risk.
Right.
And yeah, that was good. And Ford Foundation, by 1993, that's 2 years, or 2 years grant, they gave me another amount, another grant. Okay, from 20,000 to now 50. Okay, so I started because I was now doing LAPO on a full-time basis from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So beyond just going out designing forms, that, the next preoccupation was writing proposals.
Yeah, for raising money.
Yes, that becomes a major preoccupation. And to some extent, we succeeded so little. But one thing Professor Yunus advised me in 1991, when he said we should put a proposal that anyone can come and see him, have a session with him. And of course, just as what you have said, my first something to him, which I think others did, is our problem is funding. And Professor Yunus told me back clearly that Godwin, funding is not a problem. The thing, do it well.
So if you do your job well, then funding is not a problem.
Yes, exactly. And that is exactly what eventually happened.
Right. Okay, great. So where did your funding come that really got you on a track? Ford Foundation seems like played a critical role, Grameen Trust. Where was the large money that came to you to grow this to?
Yes, exactly. With the Grameen Fund, with the Grameen Foundation, Grameen Trust, and Ford Foundation, like I said, we went through a process of institutionalization. We created a board. I employed some people who were also with university degree, and they were joined together. We now had a contact with a German Christian agency. It used to be called EZE, but I think it's now EED. It's a Christian that's on. They support. They have a development segment that's provide grant. The funny thing was that they were already providing to other microcredit NGO. We actually call ourselves them community development organization, because there was nothing like microfinance. So, and LAPO came to the table very late. We're number 9. in terms of age, in terms of size, in terms of funding. Okay. So, and the Germans said, okay, fine. You are a very young organization compared to other bigger ones. So we will give you 80,000 Dutch mark as a test grant. And so they brought the money. I remember that it was for two organizations they tested. For me, because of the passion I had, I actually structure my grant budget to have more money in loan fund. And the vehicle, they said, money, I bought it down, I bought a second-hand vehicle. That's second-hand. So I had more money. I think the other organization did the other way around. So, but we did that. And within a year, the program officer for Africa visited. He visited, he stayed with me at home. We went around to visit. On the third day, he was going to leave me for Lagos. In the morning, we got his bag into the car and he entered the car. This is quite interesting story. He got into the car, and as I was moving to my door, he came out of the car and called me back and said, Godwin, his English was not very good, German. Godwin, I like everything I see. I like everything, and I stay with you, everything fine. Now, we give you 20,000 Dutch mark. Is I go from Nigeria to Togo, Togo to Germany. 2 weeks, send another proposal. As I hear the amount, send another proposal, 500,000.
So that was your first big money.
Yes, that was very significant.
Yeah.
You know.
So this is the German church-related entity that gave you that money.
Yes. That was very, that was probably around 1996, 96, 97, something within 96, 95, 96. So, and that was like, then we got one from Canada, the Justice and Peace Commission of the Catholic Church. And they provided some support, but they were purely for sensitization, education of the people. I remember then myself and the program officer, Trevor, where we go into huge arguments. It was a Godwin, we don't support microcredit. So we support education, we call it development education. And he will say that when you give microcredit and you actually have helping the poor to cope with poverty. So whereas development education, we empower the poor to question, why are they poor? You know, and so that was like, and I said, well, I agree with you that the poor people should ask questions that for the leaders or government. But even while they are doing that, the poor people urgently need money to do their little business, to put food on their table, to send their children to school. And so microcredit for me is, so they were not really funding the microcredit. But as we'll get to a point where we eventually scale up, and that will be very interesting. How do we scale up?
Right. So in that maybe idea of two things. So one is what you say is fundraising is not difficult as long as you do a good job. Focus on the job, do a great job, and that itself would bring the funding in. Now,
of course.
Yes. And then in terms of scale up, because you were one of the, institution that really scaled up into the biggest institution. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, that is very interesting. With the Ford Foundation and this Christian organization, we talked about all the other organizations like UNCF, the United Nations, UNDP, and almost other institutions. We're not doing anything in Nigeria. I will tell you the reason. Between 1993, okay, towards the end of 93 to 1998, that year, Nigeria went through the worst military dictatorship in Nigeria. It was under one General Abacha. And so Nigeria caught up from international. And so we were only probably dealing with this Christian organization. And when you write to others, they say, no, we are not working in Nigeria. But he died in 1998. And then the next year, 1999, the civilian government came in, democracy returned. And for me, I saw that as an opportunity. So because I was already visiting Bangladesh, some other, and I saw what they were doing. Grameen Bank was already about 200,000 and all that. So I developed a two-pager, I call it Project REFES, REFES. And it stands for Excellence. Okay, I said, okay, fine. That document, this is where we are. And this is where we want to be. Why have we not been able to get there? And the real thing, the key thing was that if we're going to scale up, because institution we're already talking and scaling up at that time, you will need huge fund. You must move away from grant to commercial loan. You saw? That was clear. I saw that was the game changer if we're going to do that. So with the support of Grameen Foundation, we were able to get a usage grant. Okay, it was $1.3 million. Okay, and of course, almost about 60 to 70% of that amount was to use for institutional strengthening. All right, so that for me was what I wanted. If you want to get money from donor agency, this is the understanding. This is from my own personal experience. Donor agency will support you. They operate by heart. Godwin, you are doing with poor people, you are supporting women, then they give you. But when you are going for loan, you engage lending financial institution, they operate by the head. They're talking about where are your system, where are your performance, where are your... So part of that fund, we brought in micro rates in 2002.
Damien von Stauffenberg, is that?
Damien led that to Nigeria. It was not for rating, it was institutional review.
Building.
Yes, to review this one week, Monday to Friday, they turned upside down LAPO. And on Friday at the exit meeting, Damien, at 2 o'clock, we sat around the table. Damien said, Godwin, LAPO is head and shoulder above all the other NGOs in Nigeria. And I said, Damien, let's stop. That is not what we want to hear. We want to hear the gaps. And he said that will come in the report.
Yeah.
And when the report came, we have gaps in reporting, we have gaps in risk management, we have gaps in processes. So these were listed, and they started addressing them. And so by 2004, those things, have been addressed. We become so attractive that the Code 8 from Netherlands visited for loan. They have just started giving loan. the lady for due diligence, she came in 2004, did it, and we agreed that she would give us 300,000 euro. Euro was not in paper then at that time, but today, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she got back. When she got back to Netherlands, she sent a mail to me and said, Godwin, the credit committee has met, and they said they want to increase it from 300 to 400,000 Dutchman. I mean, euro. And by early 2000, I was having a program in Harvard for 2 weeks. And they sent a mail to me and said, the agreement is ready. And I said, I'm in the US. They said, no, they will send it to my apartment. They sent it to my apartment and I sent it to them. And so we got our first loan. Of course, the Dutch Bank came in with $1 million. Ecofin came in with 500. So it was just, we became very attractive. So if you had any financial institution supporting microfinance, their program officer or their investment officer coming to Nigeria, the destination at that time was LAPO in Benin.
Yeah, so you established your reputation. Maybe
go
ahead, Godwin.
So we don't, where the issue, therefore, by the time we address those issue of challenges, we had more money. And I can tell you the impact. Let me tell you the impact. Whereas in 2004, we disbursed about 420 million naira the whole of the year. But the next year, after we received loans, 2005, we disbursed 1.1 billion naira.
Wow. Yeah.
That was the instant impact.
So what was the key to success? Good governance? What made LAPO sort of Damien Born, von Stauffenberg say you're above the rest? What was it?
Yeah. You see, after that scale up, we moved from number 9 to far number 1 above. So what were the key sources? The key sources was that we prioritize training.
Training.
Training. Very early, we set up a training unit, which today has transformed into an institute. It was a one-person desk by 1994. So the reason for training was this. You never had anyone to take microfinance you could take on. So everybody that came in was fresh. So, and then number 2, because of my getting involved internationally, I went to Bangladesh in 1991, the first. By 1995, I went. 1999, those were for training. And some of my colleagues were also going to Bangladesh for training. So attending this microcredit summit, attending, conferences, I was able to, get some of what could be considered then as the best practices. Yeah. So that was another big important thing. The third one is that we brought in a way of doing things that was a bit not common. For instance, when you talk about lending, whether formal or informal, cooperative and all that, there's a lot of compromises, corruption. There are a lot of, and so for us, it was the first time I told my colleagues and said, nobody should take a cup of water from when you visit. And that for me is not original. That was Grameen Bank, Nobody should take that. And before you leave the office, you get your transport money to the group. So you are not going to say, give you transport money. And we went ahead to incorporate that into the pre-training for potential members, telling them that on no account should do that. That the transport fare for the loan officer to come is already paid by the office. So, and for many people in our environment, that was too good.
Yeah.
It created a huge, good reputation for
You took care
LAPO.
of your employees.
Oh, my employees?
Yes, I mean, when you're
Yeah,
saying,
that is another issue for us. I strongly believe there's a new book I've written now. It's just published. 10 commandments for
business owners.
owners. Yeah, number one of the things is that one of the commandments is that never treat your staff like wood. Treat them like wood,
yeah,
without treat them like person who have their own feelings. They have that. And so in many ways, for instance, something that will be very common in Nigeria, most employees are not paid early. So we took a position that salary must be paid on or before 25th of every month. And when we made sure we did it, I will give you one example that will interest you. You know, when we scale up, other people were coming, Citibank came in, the Grameen Foundation provided a letter of credit for us to get some money from bank. Then we went to Standard Chartered, and Standard Chartered was giving us about 800 million every year. And they will require us not to pay. We just roll it over. But I think in 2010 or so, they wanted to test our capability to repay. They said 10 days to the due date, pay all the money, and then you can reloan.
Clean up. It's called clean up. So you clean up
Yes.
the line and you borrow again.
Yes, and then, they wanted to actually test whether we have the capacity. And I can tell you, Asa, that was quite, I remember the management were discussing, and one solution that came up. So, okay, let's delay the salary of staff, and then we can pay. And that will breach our commitment to staff. I remember I set up telephone call, put on my table. I call all the branches. Branch, how much do you have? Pay your staff. What is left? Send it to this central account. As before I left that desk, we got 800 million. So we paid the amount, we paid the staff salary, but our disbursement for that month dropped.
Nice.
But it was good for us.
Okay, so you didn't sacrifice the employees,
Yes, that was something that we had a huge commitment. You go to see LAPO staff to 25 years in LAPO, 20 years. The CEO today, LAPO is spending 23 years in LAPO. The executive operation, director of operation is about 23. I mean, 27 years. So that's the way the LAPO was structured.
Right. So I think just sensitive to the time here, I can talk to you for a couple of hours, but let's talk about the industry in general. I mean, in terms of how do you see the future of what you started, right, in with microfinance? How do you see the future of this? What type of developments are you seeing in Nigeria? What gives you hope about reaching out to the bottom of society, as you call it?
I think for me, I believe that in Nigeria, the future for finance for low income people, the microfinance has always been bright for two major reasons. This is a large population relatively in Africa, and of course, Nigeria is not just about large population. It also consists of people who are exceptionally enterprising.
Yes, that's very true.
I tell you that. So you can see how microfinance, if properly manage can actually grow. But when you talk about the future, I think the future of microfinance in Nigeria, even LAPO, is tied to the future of probably the global transition, especially the issue of digitalization. Okay, so I see that is why even 4 years before I left, I was already agitated, talking to my colleagues, even from this sideline. I see they're still talking about digitalization. So you're going to, there's the way we do microfinance in the past, obviously will go away. And so the ability of my colleagues to be able to sort of adapt to the situation and take advantage of that technology, giving, first of all, long experience in engaging ordinary people, and also our footprint across the country. So if they are able to get the technology, the digitalization right, LAPO is going to make huge impact in Nigeria. It's going to be a case of energizing an elephant to dance. And when elephant dances, the environment obviously will feel it. So we see that if LAPO, my colleagues, are able to adequately, digitalize their process, take advantage of technology, and push that across, the future for LAPO in Nigeria is going to be very great.
Great. How do you see the role of development banks and in terms of bringing about strengthening institution? What would you say to your funders that funded you as to what areas they can improve and learn from their challenges? And we're all challenged, right? The funders are challenged, they have their own boundaries. What would your advice be to funders who are listening to this?
Yeah, even when the social investors started, much earlier, I think the first thing that worked for the social investors then was the fact that they did everything to understand what the practice is. I remember all of you attend conferences, and engaging and all that. I think that approach is still not, is still valid. What I would expect is this: there must be a clear engagement with the funding agency, and that engagement will create one major understanding what it is. What are the current direction in terms of emphasis, in terms of fund, in terms of sector that the funders are, getting involved. For instance, clean energy, for instance, the clean energy and that. So if the borrowers, that is the borrowing institution, sufficiently understand this, and they can a sort of weave in this into what they consider will be initiatives that they will equally pursue, that are relevant to the operating environment. You understand this? But if the funder begin to operate with the mindset of just, we have this, we can push it through, and that may not. But there must be some re-engagement with that. It could also go to the point with little funding from the lender to build capacity on a specific area, especially emerging area. For instance, lending, off-grid lending. Some microfinance institutions who have had long history of funding the basic micro enterprises will need some capacity building in that direction. For me, is something that could be very helpful.
Great. One last question I would ask you is, what would your advice be to the next generation, young people that are going to be the future Godwins?
Yes.
What would you tell them?
Well, apart from getting the technical skill, which obviously they get better than us now, we said, There are certain approach to institutional building and management that tend to be valid for all generations. One is diligence, hard work.
Yeah.
It was valid in a century ago, is valid, and it will also be valid. So for me, I would pick on that. The second one for me is integrity.
Right.
It was valid in the past, a valid, do it right, even when every other person is compromising. Because as you know fairly, that if not the integrity, the relationship within the context of integrity we have with many of our donors, what Sinclair did should have collapsed LAPO. So integrity, do it right, even when everybody else is doing it, the other way. That's for me is number 2. Number 3 for me is what I may call personal discipline. Discipline in terms of utilization of the mega resources you have. I am a very popular speaker to young businesses. 2 Sundays ago, I spoke in a top hotel in Lagos to a group of Sunday. I told them, you can't be beginning your business and you want to act in a manner that you are considered as a philanthropist. No, you have to harvest your money. You have to do everything in a manner that the little you have achieve much. If you therefore have a big business later, you can set up generous foundation to support people. But where you are building, you just have to be frugal.
Frugal, yes. Great. Now, thank you very much. And this 12 Commandment for Business, is that your book as well?
Yes. It was launched this year. But again, that whether it's not Amazon, it's very popular in Nigeria. People are really picking up. Yeah, I just address the key elements for the business owner. Know yourself, borrow wisely and use it. Never treat your staff as a wood. Innovate, live in the future. Be prudent and that. Be diligent and hard work. Build institution. Go beyond yourself. Institutionalize. So desire to be big. You could start small, but set your in the sky.
Yeah.
Those are the and many people finding it very.
Thank you so much, Godwin. It was really indeed a pleasure. And
Thank you, sir.
I look forward to continuing to engage with you.